Good morning to everyone. I am known as Uncle Devin, the children's drumcussionist, and I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I am the owner of the Uncle Devin Show, which is an interactive multimedia musical experience for children that uses drums, percussion, and many art forms to cultivate their minds, sort of a dynamic cross between uh, DC's Trouble Funk and Schoolhouse Rock. And so years ago, I started this to focus on my organizing for children. See, my entire life has been about organizing. When I came out of the student movement in the late 1980s, moving into the 90s, I was organizing, particularly focusing on students and youth. And then as I got older, I started organizing adults. And then in my latter years, I decided that there's a different way that I want to try to reach children. Because one of the things that I've noticed is that if we don't give people the foundations to think critically, those are the times when where people certain beliefs can kind of just set in, and we got to give people the tools to be able to really just see things objectively, and be willing to willing to really analyze anything that's coming to us, sort of the way that a jeweler will analyze gold. You got to touch it, you got to feel it, you got to grind it, you got to do all these things just to get to the truth. It doesn't mean that you're saying something that isn't true, but you just want to make sure for yourself. And so that's what I started doing in my music, is teaching. Is just laying subtle, or not even subtle, but very direct messages about, well, I guess subtle messages because it's about entertainment for children. But, just giving them the tools to be able to think critically. So one of the songs that I did was called Tell the Truth. Yeah, it was a fun song. You know the truth, and nothing but the truth will set you free. You got to tell the truth. That's if you want to hang around me. And so a lot of these posts that you see now is me really addressing that, and the reactions I'm getting is varied. It's really incredible. Um, and so we want to touch base on that. And do I need to? You ask him if I need to do anything to let her in. I don't know if I've done that or not. But so I want to jump into this because I did two posts recently. I did two posts, one on the racist origins of Amazing Grace. And the responses have been varied, but certainly those who have been the most vocal were those who are quite upset with the fact that I'm telling a history that either they never heard of before, or one that they thought is not important because of the importance of the song. So I want to address that first. When you look at Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. And I talk a lot about that particular song. Many people have, and certainly a lot of historians, have indicated that this song was written, and no one disagrees that John Newton, who wrote the song, was a former slave trader. And so no one disagrees with that. But what they're saying is that he was a changed man. He repented for his indiscretions, and therefore he wrote the song to be able to for that particular purpose. And so in my research, because I wanted to know, again, as a jeweler, I got to touch it, I got to feel it, I got to look into it, and several pieces that I saw gave a slightly different history. Not None of them said that he didn't change and become a minister in his faith, in terms of his faith in Christianity, but there were certain aspects of his history that was just left out. So, for example, when he was, there's a story about where the word wretch comes from, and I'm not going to revisit it. You can go back and take a look at my post. But basically, the word wretch came about not necessarily because of what he was doing as a slave trader, but because of he was being abused, in his words, by an African woman from, I guess it was in the area of Sierra Leone, where he was working for another slaver, and the other slaver had a mistress who was native. And so when he got sick with malaria, she had to take care of him, and he said she just abused him, to the point of a wretch. That's what he says. So my whole argument was that okay, so the basis of him being a wretch wasn't his own indiscretion at that time, and maybe I don't know, maybe he meant that and just didn't put it, but it was also the actions of an African woman who more than likely was either enslaved, oppressed in some level, or nonetheless she was, maybe it was his mistress, maybe she had full liberty to do whatever she wanted to do at any time. So that was one thing, but then the other part of it was when I read about his history, it was certain parts that I felt that most people were being a little disingenuous about. That when he was on a ship and the ship was was really in turbulent waters. I mean, a major storm came. And as the storm came by, one of the mates on the ship was thrown overboard, more than likely succumbed to that. And he thought that he was going to die. And that's when he said that he first met God. That's when the writer said he first met God, and basically promised if you get me through this, I'm gonna change my life. And so the storm passed. He got through it. He said he changed his life. He went and married his wife, but he didn't stop slave trading for another 3 years, I believe it was. He continued the slave trade, but now while he was traveling and doing the slave trading, he would pray with his. He said he would pray with his staff instead of chastising them for not being Christian. He would just, offer them to come to prayer with him, and that they had to treat their slaves with dignity and respect. So that, and then that latter part is consistent across a lot of the histories. But it wasn't until he had a stroke that he finally stopped being a slave trader. And it ain't like he came to this epiphany earlier, stopped right in the middle of him being a slave trader. No. He waited until that time period, and then that's when the doctor said you can no longer get on that ship. Your health can't take it. So now that means his livelihood was now disrupted. He was not able to make that living. And so it then turns out that it took him 40 years before he actually spoke out against slavery. And so I just, my understanding of history is, again, people saying, I'm being very judgmental and I got to be careful because, the judge I'm giving is going to be the judge against me. Look, I'm just stating history. And all I'm saying is that people were very quick to automatically assume that he had repented. Now, that's between him and his God. I ain't got nothing to do with that. But what I do know is that he had 40 years even to be able to speak out against slavery, and he didn't. And perhaps we've been giving him too much credit. I mean, it is a beautiful song. It's a very beautiful song, but it's a song that he didn't write in terms of, he wrote the lyrics, but he didn't write the music. The music comes from a folk song called New Britain. And it's based on the pentatonic scale, which is the black keys on the keyboard and all of that. And I'm also wondering, did a lot of the music come from those African slaves coming from over there? Because a lot of those Negro spirituals are also in that pentatonic scale. So either way, I'm not getting into that. It is a beautiful song. And I was at a memorial service last weekend, and in the pews, they had the African American hymnal. And inside the African American hymnal book was Amazing Grace. And I'm really asking myself the question, how did that song, written by a white man, become part of a Negro spiritual? Let me even be more clear. Written by a white man who was a slave trader, become part of the African American, spiritual books. The other thing is, I don't really mind that because the great Pete Seeger is the one that wrote We Shall Overcome. And that became a staple of the civil rights movement. And Pete Seeger was always a part of that civil rights movement. So and Pete Seeger is white as well. So I'm not sitting here trying to say that nobody white can't ever write something that is important for the African American community. But the question is, why did that song, why did Amazing Grace become that? And that's a discussion for a whole nother day. But really, a lot of people got real upset with me about that. And my thing is, I just want to tell the truth. I just want the facts. I never said no one should sing the song. I never said that I wouldn't even ever sing the song again, which I don't plan on it, by the way. I mean, for the record. But at the time, I never said what my position would be on that. And then the other thing is, when you take a look at singing a song like, Amazing Grace and its history and where it comes from, and I got to turn this down. Um, you, you know, I never said that no one else should sing the song. That's up to you. And I ain't upset if people do. I mean, I remember, it's just such a, so many people have done renditions of it, from Aretha Franklin to, you name it. And that's part of life, and that's part of history. So I'm not too concerned with that. But for me, that song, Amazing Grace, I just want the truth to come out. And I want people to have the truth. And then you can make your own decisions. That's all I'm doing. Um, and then at the same time, I wrote a song. I didn't write a song. I did a post on the negative history of Alex Haley, and you can go back and look at that particular post, and it's been doing pretty well, and been getting some mixed comments. Some of the most recent ones that I got, though, and I'm gonna focus on those that were. Well, there were many that were in favor of it, just like a lot of people were in favor of me mentioning Amazing Grace. But a lot of people who favored the one about Alex Haley were just saying that it's we have to teach the truth. We have to let people know what's going on. Right now in this country, you have schools named after Alex Haley. In Annapolis, there's still a statute and a tribute to Alex Haley. But as I'm about to read to you, and I want to give a little more detail to this. Not only was it plagiarized, there was a huge hoax that was done on people, and we have to ask ourselves the question: why? Why was this hoax perpetuated on people, and why was ABC and many of the media establishments so eager to perpetuate this particular stereotype? I want to first start with an article that was written in June of 2023. It's written by, I believe it's someone named Ismail Bey. Alex Haley and Roots plagiarism changed American Indian identity. Okay, now, well, let me just get into this. And it first talks about the history of the lawsuit. For those who don't know, Alex Haley was sued in 1 year after the movie came out, or his book came out, I believe it was, in 1977. He was sued by a white historian named Corlander. What's Corlander's first name? I'll find his first name in just a moment. Harold Corlander. And Harold Corlander alleged that Alex Haley plagiarized from his book. He wrote a fictional book. That means it wasn't true, but he just wrote a fictional book called The African, and sued him, and in court demonstrated that at least 80 or 81 passages from his book ended up in Roots. And at the end of the day, Alex Haley admitted to plagiarizing. And I said I was going to cut that off, and I didn't. He admitted to plagiarizing, and they settled the case for $500,000 back in 1978, I believe it was. And so I want to read a few things from this, because there have been people that have been really upset. Like, why am I bringing this up? One person named all these, I believe, black conservatives that I could be talking about, like Clarence Thomas. Out of all these people you could be talking about, you're going to attack this person. Well, first, I'm not attacking anyone. I'm just stating historical facts. I believe in telling the truth, especially in advance of Tell Truth Day. Teach Truth Day. Teach Truth Day. Let me get to Teach Truth Day of Action. Okay. And it's actually called Teach Truth Day of Action. I got to give a shout out to the Zen Education Project. And there's a collaboration between Rethinking Schools and Teaching for Change. They're having their 4th annual Teach Truth Day. Teach Truth Day. Saturday, June 8th. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But when we talk about teaching the truth, are we only talking about truth that fits our particular narrative? Or are we all actually talking about the truth? I'm not even suggesting that, no one is below being perfect. We all are human. We all going to make mistakes. And perhaps this was a mistake that Alex Haley made. I don't know. But the fact was, the impact that this has had on history is very, very important. So, for example, during the testimony, and I'm just going to read parts of this piece again, and you can look it up for yourself. It was written by Ismail Bey, B-E-Y, and it's called Alex Haley and Roots: Plagiarism Changed American Indian Identity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I believe he's mentioning that about the American Indian. So Haley, in his answer to the interrogatory, why can't I talk today? Question, Haley stated, "Neither I nor any person acting on my behalf or in cooperation with me has read the work The African." That's the book by Corlander. "But I intend to read it in the near future," end quote. And you can go directly to the court case, and they have a citation for it. On direct examination during the trial, Haley, under oath, was asked, "Had you ever read the book The African prior to the publication of Roots?" He answered, "I had not." However, after the trial, in a sworn affidavit by Joseph Bruchac, I believe it is, a teacher of black literature at Skidmore College, Mr. Bruchac states, quote, "During early 1970 and 1971, excuse me, Haley came to Skidmore to lecture on the research he had been doing for a book, which at the time was called Before This Anger. I went to his lecture, and after the conclusion of the lecture, spent some time in conversation with Mr. Haley at a reception following the talk. During our conversation at the reception, I mentioned the book, The African, to him and seemed very interested. I drove 3 miles back home, obtained my copy, and brought it back to the reception. I then read several sections of The African to Mr. Haley, and after having pointed out some parts I thought especially good in the book, I gave him my personal copy of The African to Mr. Haley. Mr. Haley thanked me for giving him my copy of The African and said he would find it very useful," end quote. Now, that was in the testimony during that time period, but that still doesn't necessarily mean he read the book. People have made references for me to go back and look at certain things, and I may have received it, but I may not have read it yet. So I'm not going to just suggest that, but he definitely did not state that he had received a copy of that book during his testimony. And so the question was, how substantial was the copy? How substantial? What impact? How far did he go in doing this? Was it just simply he made a few little references and moved on? According to the plaintiff in this, in addition to copying language and expressions from The African, Haley copied attitudes, reactions, situations, storyline, plot, characters. The African served, and that's the book, The African served as a blueprint for Haley and guided him in formulating Roots. That's what the plaintiff had said. And the whole question is there a difference between paraphrasing and plagiarizing? And in this court case, they actually said it is not necessary for the infringer to literally reproduce the plagiarized material, since paraphrasing is tantamount to copying. That was in the court case before they settled it. But then it says the evidence of copying from The African in both the novel and the television dramatization of Roots is clear and irrefutable. Roots takes from The African phrases, situations, ideas, aspects of style, and of plot. But more important still, Roots finds in The African essential elements for the depiction of such things as a slave's thoughts of escape, the psychology of an old slave, the habits of mind in the hero, and the whole sense of life of an infamous slave ship. Such things are the life of a novel. And when they appear in Roots, they are the life of someone else's novel. And so this piece goes and talks a lot more about, how Corlander found out about it. His friends tipped him off to it. And let me just stop here. I'm Uncle Devin. Thank you all for joining me. And we're just having a discussion about two recent posts that I did that has gotten some great reaction. One on the racist origins of Amazing Grace, and the other is on the plagiarism or the negative history of Alex Haley. And whether you want to take him out of history or not is up to you. But this is a negative aspect. This is a negative aspect that we generally don't hear people talk about because it might fit people's narrative and make them feel comfortable. I know how important Roots was to me. Roots was very important. I loved that. I mean, it just gave me identity. It gave me a perspective of life and who I was, and it has shaped most of my life up until the time I learned about this. I mean, even to this day, I have to still go back and undo and unlearn certain things to see if it is true. And that's kind of what I do here, about evolving with Uncle Devin. I just want people to evolve. But let me just say this. Now, I'm just going to continue to read a little bit from this particular piece here. What piece is this? This is, continuing in that same piece. The results, but plagiarism is the least of the problems of Roots, and they would likely have remained largely unknown had journalist Philip Nobile not undertaken a remarkable study of Haley's private papers shortly before they were auctioned off. Okay, so someone went in and they just looked at his private papers and they wanted to do an investigation. The result was featured in a devastating 1993 cover piece in the Village Voice. It confirmed from Haley's own notes early claims that the alleged history of the book was a near total invention. Now, I love fiction. Fiction can play a huge role in shaping everything. But this was not billed as fiction. This was billed as his actual life, going back 7 generations. And according to this evidence, it was all a lie. At least the majority of it was. Quote, virtually every genealogical claim in Haley's story was false, Nobile has written. None of Haley's early writing contains any reference to the mythic ancestor, the African, named Kunta Kinte. Indeed, Haley's later notes gives his family name as Kante, or Kante, not Kinte. But yet even today, much of America, both black and white, continues to perpetuate the Roots myth. In 1997, Haley's older brother, George, was named U.S. ambassador to Gambia. Gambia is where he was saying his family roots came from. His family's supposedly homeland. Then Vice President Al Gore at the time said, George Haley is the direct descendant of Kunta Kinte. Added Gore, Haley's appointment would complete a cycle of history. So now we have U.S. public policy being shaped by a lie. And what was even more interesting was even what the country of Gambia had said at that particular time. I'll even say that Haley himself even said that, quote, that he was, quote, caught up in the sweep and the swell of the overall thing, saying that, quote, the quest for a symbolic history of a people just swept me like a twig atop a rushing water. Okay? And I even understand, and I got this other article that I found that that came out in 2002. It was out of the South Coast Today Standards Times, and it was written. It was a staff writer that wrote it. Matter of fact, this was written by the great Stanley Crouch, and in this he states that. Was it in this one? I don't want to misquote him in here. It was in one of these pieces where they said that the country of Gambia said that yes, it's a lie, but it's a good lie because it brought them so much tourism after that. So now we have the media that benefited from the second most watched finale in history that benefited from it financially. You have then at the time that country of Gambia that said that they didn't care if it was a lie because it brought them so much money into what they were doing. And going back to the article that I was just about to read, and then I will pretty much wrap it up. Um, this article was called "Roots is a Lie Too Good to Get Rid of." Okay, and this was by Stanley Crouch. Um, and what he went on to say was that there are a number of reasons the truth about roots is still ignored. One is that black Americans, primarily because of the influence of Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam, became obsessed with being a lost people in America. People who had, quote, no knowledge of self. Younger black people were told they were not Americans, but victims of Americanism. Their true identity, Malcolm X said, was African and Islamic. The truth had been hidden from them by white men who, and then he just talks about something else. But he said another reason for the hoax has held that Haley, riding on the success of the autobiography of Malcolm X, for which he got, as told, credit, knew how to hustle. He had already been accused of plagiarizing an interview with Miles Davis for Playboy. Now, I just found this out. I can't verify it. This was written by Stanley Crouch in 2002. I can go back and take a look at that. So allegedly, there's another piece that they're saying Haley had plagiarized. He goes on to talk about different things, but about Haley. But he said, but Haley called Nobel, going back to the person who was doing this research back in 1979. He called him in February 1979 at New York Magazine when he was reporting on the federal case. Haley said he shouldn't report on the case because the Ku Klux Klan could use the outcome against his people. And then I'm gonna conclude with this part here with Stanley Crouch, where he says, on another occasion, I heard Haley protest on the radio that they, in quotes, were trying, quote, to say that black people have no history, end quote. At another point, according to Nobel, quote, he compared the truth about him to those people who attacked Anne Frank and said that there was no Holocaust. He would resort to anything, end quote. This is Nobel that wrote that. Since Roots has brought millions of black tourist dollars to Gambia, this is where it was. One Gambian said, this is one Gambian, so let me clarify. This wasn't the Gambian government. This was one Gambian. This was, I retract that. This was not the country of Gambia. Sorry about that, Gambia. I should have done that. It says, one Gambian said to me, yes, it is a lie, but it is a good lie, which probably led him to the title of this particular piece. The book remains an opportunistic insult to black people, and no amount of excuses will change that harsh fact. And that was from Stanley Crouch in 2002. And then the last piece that I would say on at least using my notes was something that was said by the great John Henry Clark. Anybody that has studied African history will have to know who John Henry Clark is, one of the pioneers in African thought, African history. But as the late John Henry Clark, Dean of Afrocentrist Scholars, he admitted that he cried real tears when I realized that Haley was less than authentic, end quote. And then he goes on to say, quote, we don't need no more fakers. We don't need no more phonies. We can take our tea with or without sugar, end quote. And I guess that's where I'm at here. Truth is what it is, and we have to be willing to tell that truth no matter what. And one comment that if you go back and take a look at my piece will show you that one person was saying, well, out of all these people, again, I could have talked about all these. He mentioned pretty much a lot of these black conservatives, Republicans. And now, a lot of this is going to be a part of my evolving with Uncle D. Now, at one point in my life, I was where that person was that criticized me for not criticizing the black conservatives. I thought that the enemy was only black conservatives. But in my own evolution, I've come to realize that whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, you're serving the same interests of a capitalist system that exploits people. So for me, I don't just tell the truth against one particular group because I think that group, because that, I'm no longer there. I've evolved beyond that space for me. I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I'm just saying my truth. I'm just letting you know my truth. And so for me, that's how I look at that, I have to tell the truth no matter where it is, because, it's important for us to know that. And then let me also lastly say that I know that it really hurts, as it hurt me, when I found out that certain things that I just held very close to my heart over the years may have not been true. I mean, it hurts. I mean, you can go back and look at my posts. I mean, I used to love the song Jingle Bells until I understood the history of Jingle Bells. Go back and take a look at that post. When I was younger, I used to do the game Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo until I understood the derogatory statements that was in that. And it hurts. I remember doing a post on the ice cream truck song. I mean, I used to love the ice cream truck song until I understood the racist history of that. It hurts. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. It really, 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 really hurts. But, so I get that part of it. But what happens is, in order to respond to that, people, and I don't mind it, I'm not saying this to want any sympathy, but people will attack me because I'm bringing out this history. But I heard this from someone, I think from Asian Sage, I think it was. He once said that when a guru or a wise spiritual teacher, when a guru points to the moon, all the fool sees is his finger. People are only looking at my finger and not looking at what I'm pointing to. People are only focusing on the wrong thing when I'm just trying to point out an aspect of history. I'm not telling you shouldn't continue to watch Roots or anything like that. I just want you to have the truth as I have learned the truth. And then just take it from there. That's your decision to make. For me, I now have to teach the truth of Roots, and I won't push it as a story of accuracy, because as the first article that I mentioned talked about how it changed American Indian identity, there are those within our community, especially those that are called Moors. Anybody ever go and look up the history of the Moors, which typically represents people of color, at least historically. If you go back and look at all the documents, long before there was black or anything like that, we were called Moors around the world. That's just a reality. But when you go back and take a look at this, many of those arguments, those that come from that tradition, will say that we did not come in millions on slave ships to the United States. That we were already here. That we are the original indigenous people of North America. Some will even go as far as saying that before the Pangea, when Africa separated from North America, that the United States was what they call Northwest Africa. And then through years it split and we were already here. You have those that have that perspective. And I'm certain that Ismail Bey wrote this piece to support that theory. But the fact is, there's more information that's out there that we have to be willing to unlearn what we've learned and to be able to learn something new. And then I'll conclude with this. I grew up in the church most of my life. I'm no longer in the church. I don't adhere to any particular religion, but Christianity is still a very important part of my upbringing and my life. And one of the things about, you talk about Jesus and the good news, people hated Jesus, not because what he was bringing forth was good, but because what he was bringing forth was new. Many people don't want new. They want to stay in their old way, keep things the way they are, because it's comfortable. It's part of waking up. Nobody wants to be woken up. You know how grumpy we get and somebody wakes us up and we're in a good deep sleep. And that's how I equate a lot of the comments that I've been receiving, because it hurts. It hurts when we get to know this aspect of truth. And so I just wanted to share that with everyone. Go back and take a look at those two pieces. I have some more ideas coming. A couple of people have suggested some other aspects of history for me to look at, and I'm looking into them. I love that, because I like to learn more. and share my results. I'm a researcher, and I call myself a researcher for truth, and I'm gonna tell the truth, regardless on the outcome, regardless on how people feel about that. So let me go back and then just say that again for those who are interested. Again, I consider this part of my project of supporting the Zen Education Project, a collaboration between Rethinking Schools and Teaching for Change. You can go to hashtag Teach Truth Day. It's their fourth annual one on Saturday, June 8th. Teaching materials are available. Just sign up. Consider being a co-sponsor to spread awareness. You can go to Zen Project, and it's ZINNED project.org, and be a part of this. And I want to commend them for standing up and willing to, attack those, or really not even attack those, to stand up for truth for those who are attacking the truth and want to take books out, certain books out of schools and dictate this history. Unfortunately, the toothpaste is out of the tube, and there's nothing you can do about it. And kudos to everyone that is moving in that direction. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful weekend. I wish you all nothing but peace, love, and prosperity. And if you haven't yet, please go to my YouTube page, Evolving with Uncle D. Go to Evolving with Uncle D. This is a YouTube page for grown-ups. I have one for children that's called Uncle Devin Show. And then we have Evolving with Uncle D, where we as adults can get into these discussions. And again, evolving means it's continual. So I'm still learning just as you're still learning. And that's the only thing that we can ask for. So I think all minds clear, all hearts open, as we used to say at the church. Thank you all so much. And as I like to end, as I always do, just remember that life is a drum. So beat it.